English and French. If you need it, you know what to do. Click on the globe icon at the bottom of your screen and choose the language you need. And we are equally live streaming this meeting on our YouTube channel. Now that the housekeeping information is out of the way, it is my pleasure and delight to hand over to the moderator of today's session. He is a visiting researcher at Imperial College London and a member of the esteemed Malabo Montpellier panel. Please welcome to the stage our moderator for today, Dr. Debisi Araba.
Thank you very much, Dr. Butake. Good afternoon or greetings, everyone, from wherever you are following us from around the world. It's our pleasure to host you today for the 12th Malabo Montpellier Forum. My name is Debisi Araba, as like said. I'm a visiting research fellow at the Center for Environmental Policy, Imperial College London, and more importantly, a member of the Malabo Montpellier panel. I would like to invite our executive chairperson, Academia 2063, and co-chair of the Malabo Montpellier panel, Dr. Ousmane Badiane, to provide the welcome remarks. Dr. Badiane.
Thank you very much, Debisi, for handing me the floor. Welcome to everyone who is joining us. Let me start by welcoming and giving greetings on behalf of my co-chair to the forum co-chairs, His Excellency Prime Minister Haile Mariam and Ambassador Alawi. We are happy to have you here with us. Thank you for always making time and being so generous. I would like to welcome and greet Minister Zurkalaini and Minister Musafiri, as well as His Excellency Minister Gibeni, and your representatives and colleagues, friends and colleagues and partners of Academia 2063, Malabo Montpellier panel. Welcome to the 12th edition of the panel forum. The topic of today couldn't be more important than any other topic. And we're happy that while we're discussing this here, we have some of the strongest female leaders on the continent, my sisters, Agnes Kalibata and Isman Alwafi. We are talking about positioning women in the middle of the value chains in Africa to play the role that is theirs. We know how active and how energetic they are. Yet there's a lot that needs to be done to make sure that the food system value chains works for them. So what we are here to do is to look at the experience from 4 African countries that have been leading the pack in terms of creating the conditions, providing the resources, and doing whatever it takes to make sure that women in the food systems and across the life of their nations, in politics, in business, in science and technology, and everywhere, are playing the role that is theirs as leaders, as agents, change agents, as contributors, and the like. The work of the panel, as always, looks at successes and positive change across the continent. But we look at it from a very specific angle, the angle of the action of government. We can look at the topic from so many different angles, the technical complexities, the drivers, the importance to economics, and so on and so forth. Those are good, a lot of people do that. But here what we do is to look at action that governments can scale, can imitate and replicate. And these actions are around institutional innovation, policy reforms, and programmatic interventions. And what you will be seeing in this report and hearing today in this session is what Rwanda, Benin, Ghana, and I forgot the first country, have done to move the needle. So thank you for joining us in this discussion. And we look forward to all the many participants around the table who also will be joining in with their own experience and their own wisdom to help us shape an agenda around women and gender at this very critical time when we're thinking about the post-Malabo agenda. So we couldn't have a more opportune time to do this. So welcome to all of you who have made your time to join us here, and we look forward to a very rich discussion. Back to you, Davis.
Thank you very much, Dr. Badian. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we go to the meat of the matter, and it is my distinct pleasure to invite a member of the Malabo Montpellier panel and the Director of Natural Resources Institute at the University of Greenwich, Professor Cheryl Hendricks, to launch the 12th report of the Malabo Montpellier panel. Over to you, Professor Hendricks. Could you please unmute yourself?
Might help. Right, you can hear me? Thank you, Debisi, and good day to the co-chairs of the forum and the co-chairs of the panel, as well as to colleagues who are online. Thank you for the opportunity to be able to present this very important report. Thank you, Leah, for helping me. If you could go to the first slide, I'd be grateful. Thank you. So the Malabo Montpellier panel has addressed women in agriculture before with a report in 2012 entitled Women in African Agriculture, Farmers, Mothers, Innovators and Educators. As well as in every one of the reports that we've published, you will find reference to the role of women in agriculture and food systems and the central part that women play in these roles. But this particular report brings attention and updates some of the information around this topic. We know that almost 2/3 of women in Africa are employed in agri-food systems as producers, agri-dealers, processors, distributors, and traders. We also know that socio-cultural and systemic changes disempower and limit their agency. That is, they take away the capacity of individuals and groups to make their own decisions about the very foods they eat, what they grow, how it's processed, how it's distributed, and how they engage in the processes that shape the food system policies and governance. These relate to a number of issues that are familiar to many of you. For example, secure land tenure rights, which are important about making decisions about production and harvesting, and also for leveraging collateral and making investment decisions. We know this is not unique to women in Africa. Both men and women face land and security issues, but women in particular, their access is complicated by their age, marital status, social standing, and other household and community roles, as well as many legislative inconsistencies, often making them dependent on men to gain access to rights derived through marriage, inheritance, or gifting. We also know that access to finance can unlock new business opportunities across the food system and allow Africa's enterprising women to take risks, invest in technologies, adopt new operational standards, expand and diversify production and business systems. But we know that financing is a challenge. The AFDB have estimated that the financing gap for women in African agriculture is estimated to be around $15.6 billion in agriculture alone. Also estimate that women's inability to access finance is expected to reduce Africa's GDP by $316 billion by 2025, a crucial element that we need to correct. In terms of access to education and information, it's quite simple. We know that information and education empowers. Improvements in women's education accounted for 43% of the total reduction in child malnutrition in developing countries between 1970 and 1995. Other studies show us that women with access to education are less likely to be hungry themselves or to raise stunted children. Yet women's time is extremely limited. We know that women spend 3.4 times more time than men in unpaid care work at home, between 10 to 17 hours a day. So where do women find the time to take up entrepreneurial activities? We also know that women face many health risks, particularly around communicable diseases, maternal and perinatal conditions, and nutritional deficiencies that really do affect the way in which women are able to do business. So this particular report focuses on some of the ways in which we can improve access to resources and how we can find ways of addressing these challenges. Sorry, I've lost track with where we are. Leah, can you go 2 slides on, please? Right, brilliant, thank you. So the Malabo Montpellier panel has identified numerous policy and technological solutions to help women access machinery, equipment, and harness the benefits of digitizing agriculture. And we know that many countries across Africa have been implementing a number of post-harvest and agricultural production advances that support women. So let's take a look at some of these specific elements that both hinder and can encourage women's participation in food systems. Next slide. Thank you. In terms of production, there are many different ways in which we could be looking at more specific focus on how women access the technologies and the information to improve production, including digital solutions, and particularly looking at labor-saving technologies in post-harvest handling and processing. Here as well, it's not only on governments, but also for the private sector to look at how best to retain women and to hire women in ways that keep them employed in the sector and able to engage. Next slide. In terms of distribution and trade, we know that there are many constraints, particularly to women's movement, that relate to distribution and trade. But agri-food systems provide many opportunities for both men and women that can lead to fairer, stronger, and more sustainable societies. Digitization, solar-powered irrigation, mobile money systems are all helping to create a more inclusive financial system that supports women. We know that traditional financial institutions are improving as digital skills become available, and policymakers are actively removing barriers to finance for African women. We know that nutrition and consumption remain core to the fight against malnutrition and needs to be considered not only in what women produce, but also the education and access to resources. So without action, African women are at risk of disease and malnutrition, robbing Africa of its future potential. Next slide. In terms of leadership and policy, a great deal of progress has been made in several African countries and at the continental level as well to strengthen women's active participation, inclusion, and representation in political leadership positions, and as well as in policy design and international forums. But we know that just counting the numbers is not enough. We need to make sure that that agency is there. As of 2020, 13 African countries had parliamentary quotas, 15 had candidate quotas, and 10 had voluntary party quotas. So some progress being made. UN Women believes that 2 main obstacles preventing women from participating fully in political life are still structural and capacity gaps, elements that we really do need to address. Increased involvement, though, at perhaps the local level can help to build that leadership and the confidence in order to allow more women to step up. So this may well be the entry point. So we need to look at some of the examples from countries like Rwanda, which is a world leader with 61% of female representation in parliament. And we know that Rwandan women's influence isn't just in the numbers, but also in the influence in those positions. Next slide. There are many continental policy frameworks that do focus on women's rights, empowerment, and equity. And through the years, there have been a number of these iterations and strengthening and inclusion of women's rights in various policy documents. We know that many African countries have signed and also ratified declarations, conventions, and protocols that promote gender equality and women's economic empowerment. And these are integrated into many constitutions and legislative processes. So this slide presents some of the array of different policy mechanisms that exist at the moment. In terms of the Malabo Declaration, we know that one of the 7 components speaks specifically to greater inclusion of women in agricultural growth and transformation. And it's in this context that the Malabo Declaration commits member states to extend preferential entry and participation by women and youth in gainful and attractive agribusinesses, to increase the proportion of rural women that are empowered in agriculture to 20% by 2025 across a range of aspects, including decision-making, access to productive resources, control of the use of income, leadership in communities, and time allocation for leisure. But we know that in the 3rd biennial review report, 10 countries were reportedly on track to achieve this particular target. However, this is down from 16 countries in the 2nd review. So we've lost a little bit of ground. Next slide, please. At the regional level, we know that there are also a number of integrations of these global and continental agreements into various structures and policies across the different parts of the continent. And RECs play a very important role in implementing these. So, for example, ECOWAS has a network that seeks to provide a consistent high-level discussion and policy building space among stakeholders in advocating for an increase in the exchange of best legislative practices, something that the Malabo Montpellier panel believes is really important, so learning from examples. These relate to gender equality, responsible investment in agriculture, and also in food security. SADC has established guiding principles for how gender issues should be addressed in SADC countries. IGAD and ECAS recommend increasing the effectiveness of dialogue between various levels of government to improve gender planning and budgeting. And COMESA has set out to sensitize customs officials on women's and girls' rights in order to mainstream these elements in development. So a lot happening and many great examples that can be built on. Next slide. These, of course, reiterate what has happened in the global declarations, many of them a few decades old and well established. We know that SDG 5 focuses on gender equality, and this speaks very clearly to the Malabo Declaration. Next slide. So moving on then to the experience and examples from 4 African countries as a way of peer learning in Africa and profiling what has worked rather than focusing on what most other reports focus on, which are the negative components related to African development. We think in the Malabo Montpellier panel, there's much more powerful lessons to be learned from positive lessons and reinforcement. Next slide. So as with all the reports, we focused on a specific methodology to identify the case studies to be profiled in this report. And this was 4 countries. They were drawn from the biennial review report, looking at what countries had done in terms of performance category 4.4 on women's participation in agriculture. So although 10 countries listed on this slide did actually achieve the same score, the team drafting the report looked a bit more deeply to look at what lessons could be learnt from that. The indicator used to identify these countries was based on this category 4.4, which uses as its base the Women's Empowerment in Agriculture Index, and looks particularly at the total number of women engaged in agriculture, the proportion of women who make decisions about agricultural production, the proportion of women that have access to decision-making power about productive resources, the proportion of women who have control over the use of income, women who are in leadership in the community, the time allocated for leisure, and the number of women who are directly empowered in agriculture. So this led to the identification of these 4 countries. Let's move to looking in depth at what these countries have done that sets examples for other countries to attempt and also to be encouraged to apply. Next slide. If we take first to look at Ethiopia, Ethiopia has institutional architecture and agricultural focused policies. These focus both at the horizontal and the vertical institutional level, with a number of comprehensive institutions and policies with quite far-ranging influences and leading to change for Ethiopian women. At the horizontal level, line ministries like the Ministry of Agriculture and Natural Resources have added a Women's Affairs Directorate, gender-focused people, and Women's Affairs desks to address the gaps in the perspectives for the specific ministry itself. On the vertical governance level, the Women's Affair Bureaus or offices have been created as local coordination and implementation bodies at the regional, zonal, and Woreda levels. And these help to create continuous engagement and exchange notes on best practices. There's also been extensive reform in the extension sector with increase in the number of extension officers or development agents as they're called, including the number of women extension officers. The agricultural, technical and vocational education and training colleges have also included gender-sensitive training to overcome the challenges that women face in accessing extension services. So deliberate integration of supporting the future system to deal with the challenges. The 1993 National Policy on Ethiopian Women acknowledges the challenges that women in all walks of life face and proposes principles and steps to be taken to eliminate norms and biases that hinder women's participation in Ethiopian society, particularly in the economic domains, and to accelerate equity between men and women. This is specifically in the context of food systems, which focuses on women's rights to own property and to benefit from their own labor. This policy also promotes access to basic social services and calls for the eradication of customs that hinder women from taking leadership roles. Ethiopia's gender equity strategy for agriculture sector is also an example. It is the result of a comprehensive gender assessment in the agriculture sector, which itself was the outcome of an in-depth national consultation in partnership with multi-institutional task forces. This strategy provides a national framework to ensure gender equity as a means of transforming agriculture and increasing its role in Ethiopia's economic development. Some of the proposed interventions include enhancing capacity amongst ministerial staff and their regional equivalents to improve service delivery and accountability, and targeted changes within the delivery services to women farmers, pastoralists, and agropastoralists. For example, in strengthening policies, institutional structures, and systems, as well as generating gender-responsive data, information, and evidence. One of the other elements that Ethiopia has focused on is a land registry to allow for greater access to the transformation and registration of land. So as well as awareness campaigns around land issues. So one great example from Ethiopia, if we can move then to the next slide, and to the case of Ghana, where funding for gender and women's empowerment is the main theme we see from the analysis of what Ghana has done. Ghana's budget for the Ministry of Gender, Children and Social Protection doubled between 2019 and 2022, a relatively short period of time, going from $50 million to $97 million, signifying the importance given to the mandate. One of the notable elements of this is that administrative expenditures are fixed at 1.14% in 2022, allowing the bulk of the budget to be spent on what it should be, and helping particularly on priorities of children's rights, domestic violence reduction, and gender mainstreaming. Also in Ghana, the Gender and Agricultural Development Strategy addresses barriers to women's empowerment in food systems, such as access to land, education, technologies, and finance. The strategy aims to make extension services more inclusive of women by ensuring that outputs and service delivery are targeted to women's needs. So the strategy sets out targeted mechanisms in special government programs for the provision, for example, of subsidized agricultural inputs, where 40% of the beneficiaries must be women. Ghana has also mainstreamed gender in a number of different ways. The Department of Gender and the Women in Agricultural Development Directorate in the Ministry of Agriculture promotes the delivery of gender-inclusive improved technologies and information on food systems. The Livelihoods Empowerment Against Poverty Program, or LEAP, is a large-scale cash transfer program in which 56% of the beneficiaries are women, and these beneficiaries receive cash, food, and education. Ghana has also paid attention to finance and microfinance and loans, providing these to small businesses or for individual loans to beneficiaries for a short period not exceeding 1 year. So it addresses the quick turnaround of access to finance. Thank you. Can we go to the next slide? Of course, Rwanda, which I've already mentioned, has a very high proportion of parliamentarians, has done a number of different elements and really walk the talk on women's empowerment. The Constitution reserves 30% of parliamentary seats in decision-making in both central and decentralized entities to women, but currently women represent 61.3% in Parliament. The 2022 Global Gender Gap from the World Economic Forum ranked Rwanda as the 6th country globally and the first in Africa in bridging the gender gap. The Ministry of Gender and Family Promotion oversees policy making, while the Gender Monitoring Office in the Prime Minister's Office, which is accountable for women's rights and ensures compliance with public, private, and civil society, helps to mainstream the principles. The National Women's Council also participates and influences political processes. One of the innovative components of Rwanda's approach is the gender responsive budgeting that is enforced by organic law on state finances and property, which requires government institutions and departments to issue disaggregated gender expenditure on budget statements, so transparency at every level. Rwanda has also revised the land law in 2021 to guarantee equal rights on land access, ownership, and utilization of both men and women. So showing a spread from on the ground levels up to the political levels, so transformation at all stages. And lastly, if we move to Togo, we see quite a different example where Togo's leadership has been championing women's empowerment at the highest level of government. growing the number of women entrepreneurs that participate in political processes. They have a very strong affirmative action policy that reserves 25% of public tenders to women-owned businesses. So this is not just in government, but also spreading then to what happens in opening up opportunities to women to participate in public procurement processes. The National Gender and Equality Policy outlines various actions to improve women's access to education and productive resources such as land. The National Fund for Inclusive Finance supports women to access financial resources and invest in income-generating activities by providing credit at lower interest rates. There's also a national gender equity and equality policy that seeks to increase the productive capacity of women and their income by ensuring access to land, for example. So the government intends to equip women with skills and access to credit for business opportunities. The policy and strategic plan for transforming agriculture by 2030 was formulated in 2015 and is the blueprint and guide to agricultural modernization in Togo. And it includes vocational training to foster on-farm and off-farm employment in rural areas, focusing on both youth and women. And then also an agricultural policy that aims to achieve at least 30% women's representation in agribusiness leadership by 2030. So again, a range of elements from the political to the everyday level of ensuring support to women. So having considered these 4 case studies, and yes, you can go to the next slide, thank you, as examples of some of the things that African countries are doing in innovative ways of ensuring that we move more progressively towards equity and to supporting women as in their role in African agricultural and food systems, but making sure that we have gender sensitive approaches. The panel has come up with these 8 recommendations for action that we believe could advance this agenda, with a specific focus to thinking about the post-Malabo context and how these could be positioned more strongly in the next iteration of the CAADP agenda. Firstly, and something that CAADP has been focusing on since the start, was the consolidation of various policy frameworks. So while there's a strong track record of commitments by the African Union and regional bodies to enhance women's position in society and in food systems, we really do need to coherently consolidate all these various components and perhaps update some of the current policies and programs. Secondly, to implement and importantly, to resource policies and institutions to meet these global, continental and national commitments on women's equality and food system transformation. So putting our money where our mouths are, as you can see, Ghana has done in increasing the budget. This must include dedicated funding in national budgets, as well as affirmative action measures to make sure that we do actually implement what we have promised. Political representation is, of course, very important, and making sure that it's not just the numbers, but that the agency of and influence of policymakers is enforced. But this is important to address deeply rooted systemic inequalities and to ensure that policies are designed in a way that meets the specific needs of women. Sometimes policymakers don't consult the actual beneficiaries of the policy. So having women in parliament is important to bring the voice of those women to the policy-making decisions. Centering women, empowering women and strengthening their agency and role as change makers in food systems is an urgent need and part of deliberate planning and interventions that will promote equity and equality across all aspects of food systems and promote sustainable food systems and their transformation. women and gender considerations can no longer be an afterthought to programming or a tick box to achieving what is needed. They really have to be central to what we're doing. But we need to foster inclusive behavioral change. So just informing women of their rights, for example, doesn't necessarily lead to empowerment. We need to sensitize boys and men to the changes that are needed to support the empowerment of girls and women. And behavioral change is needed to address power dynamics and social norms and foster an understanding of why gender equality is mutually beneficial to both boys, men, girls, and women. But we also need to consider that we need to tailor products and services specifically for women. So dealing with the social needs, the economic constraints, and the circumstances that many women in Africa find themselves in, particularly related to women's time and mobility. So you don't want to introduce ideas that increase the need for time. We want to create time-saving energies. We need to step up on the STEM considerations and make sure that we are empowering and training girls and women to take up various roles in the food system, including education in science, technology, engineering, and maths, as well as on subjects like healthy diets and nutrition, entrepreneurship, and modern farming techniques and technologies. And then lastly, collecting data for accountability. So we've seen a couple of examples in the 4 countries where gender disaggregated data is made available. And this makes the system far more transparent and helps us then to track women's contribution to African food systems. At the moment, this is still relatively limited, and we don't necessarily have the data available to be able to do this tracking. The post-Malabo agenda is an opportunity for countries to recommit to consistently and comprehensively reporting on the CAADP indicators that relate to women's engagement in food system, and to consistently collect this gender disaggregated data. So some fantastic examples of what countries have actually done and what they've managed to achieve through making quite significant changes at various levels of society and across the value chain, and examples that can influence the design of the post-Malabo process for CAADP. Thank you so much for the opportunity to have presented this report.
Thank you very much, Professor Hendricks, for giving us an excellent walkthrough of the Malabo Montpellier panel report, Bridging the Gap: Policy Innovations to Put Women at the Center of Food Systems Transformation in Africa. It's my pleasure at this point to invite Her Excellency Assia Ben Salah Alawi, the Ambassador at Large to the Kingdom of Morocco and co-chair of the Malabo Montpellier Forum, to provide thoughts on the report. Your Excellency, you've heard the 8-point agenda action points, the 4 countries that were highlighted, the policy innovations from Togo, Ghana, Ethiopia, and Rwanda. How do you see the report and its impact on how countries can learn from each other on a race to the top? Over to you, Your Excellency.
Well, thanks to Dr. Araba. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, Professor Van Braun, Dr. Badian, the honorable representatives of the Malabo Montpellier panel, and ministers and senior representatives of the African countries present today, all protocols observed. We are here today to talk about the status of women in Africa's agri-food systems, and to propose actions that put women at the center of food systems change. Thank you very much, Professor Cheryl Hendricks, for your concise presentation of a very rich report, and which actually provide us many, many opportunities to learn from, and probably to duplicate, adapt, and scale up. In a rapidly changing global context, we believe there is an urgent need for this conversation. As co-chair of the Malabo Montpellier Forum, I'm pleased to see the launch of this timely report. We now know the women and girls were disproportionately affected by COVID-19 pandemic. Partial confinement and the closure of critical economic education and social activities exacerbated existing inequalities. The COVID-19 pandemic has shed a glaring light on persisting inequalities and in some cases led to reversal of the progress that had been made toward greater equality between men and women, particularly in this field. It also increased the burden on women as they strove to fulfill their multiple roles of managing their families, farms, business, and so forth. At the same time, we find that the discourse on food and agriculture has evolved and advanced rapidly, acknowledging the complexity existing within farms and far beyond. The impact of the climate crisis on food systems urges us to sharpen and focus on where, how, and by whom food is produced, processed, and consumed. The UN Food System Summit held in 2021 marked a pivotal moment in the way the world views our food and agriculture systems. We can no longer consider food and agriculture within farm production only, or separate from nutrition, health, and environmental outcomes. We must take into account such findings and put women as central actors and agents in the system. And for example, see how the One Health perception, which is progressing and why women are extremely active, has to materialize on the ground. Moreover, global political and social developments in the past few years have elevated discussions around girls' and women's rights to the forefront of global political discourse. Allow me, however, to ask the question, how to close the gap? How to proceed to put action in harmony with the rhetorics? I must admit that this report gives us a few answers and lessons. Women and girls around the world, including in Africa, are increasingly sounding concerns on the discriminations they face. Inequality still covers a wide spectrum in all walks of life, ranging from meeting simple but fundamental human security needs, just as education, or to what they can wear in public, to closing the gender pay gap, to being represented in leadership positions in science, business, politics, and so forth. We women have not been waiting to be granted a space in which to exercise our political rights. We have repeatedly demonstrated that we are equal members of society and have been leading actions for change where needed. In my own country, Morocco, I really deplore that women's participation in the labor force remains restricted and sometimes mostly occupy low productivity sectors and low paying jobs that require low skills. According to the recent report by Policy Center for the New South, the participation of women in the labor force in many MENA regions, in most of MENA regions, and of course, Morocco part of it, is among the lowest globally. And moreover, it has declined since 2000 by 24%, while only 4% for men. So these dim observations, however, should not overlook the improvements underway on the larger scope, and some are really tangible. You've been mentioning greatly human rights. Women's rights have really progressed tangibly in Morocco since 2005 with the family code reform, 2007 with the nationality code, and more importantly with the constitution of 2011 which ambitions real gender equality, and for which concrete steps have been taken to implement it. However, I do hope that the very intense debate which is going now with the procedure of improving the legislation in this field will really enhance these women's rights, and most importantly, the implementation of the progress which has been recorded. Let me tell you as well that by 2025, just to stay in the global scope, that all Moroccan citizens, including women, of course, and the jobless, will benefit from global social security coverage, and which really has been launched 2.5 years ago. This is really important because it will help really bridge the gap. And some concrete gains have been as well recorded in the education, which are really substantial, including for girls in the rural areas. Some outstanding performances have been as well reached by students, by female students, which are worth mentioning. Allow me, as you know, to quote the African Queen of Mathematics this year, 2023, who is Moroccan, Hiba Al-Farshiwi. And moreover, she's from a very small city in Ait Baha, Shtuka. And she has really scored top ranking with 35 points, the girls, and another one won the gold medal with 30 points. We should as well, I should as well, mention that many universities are really gaining a lot of improvements, and I can mention only the Polytechnique Mohammed VI University, which is extremely active in Africa in our domain. But I would like here to pay tribute to the Al-Khawain University for two main achievements on the international scale, its own, but as well for the female students in this university. First of all, it got the renewal of 10-year accreditation by NICHE, which, as you know, is the New England Commission for Higher Education, and it is the only university in Africa to have earned this distinction. The Al-Khawain University has as well been granted the renewal of the UNESCO Chair for Water Decision-Making, Women and Decision-Making, which is chaired by Asma Al-Qasmi, and as you know, is extremely critical for our domain of research. Some female students have really won achievements. I should mention only, the Nassima Ait Benishu, who achieved the second highest score in the world for MFT, the major field test in business, 197 out of 200. And another one who was in the top 1% in the world. Others have gained scholarships for prestigious universities as Harvard, Oxford, and Cambridge. And I would like to mention as well that in the very sensitive area of engineering, Morocco is experiencing an exceptional high rate of female students among the ranks of students in these schools, which actually triggers the curiosity and even the astonishment of some developed country like France, which is endeavoring to get higher rates of female students in these universities and institutes. Let me just mention as well that vibrant NGOs are extremely active to include rural women through better training. The schools of second chance are really flourishing in Morocco, and as well through including finance. You will hear much more, of course, about the sector by my friend, Si Mohammed Ait Qadi. I do know that we still have to transform this high potential into concrete progress on the ground. But I think that these achievements do pave the way for Morocco's ambition to build for the regional continental knowledge hub by 2035 within the framework of the new development model strategy. So while Professor Hendrick's presentation of the report does show that there is a reason for optimism and pockets of progress, let's not lean back and relax now. No, the topic is too important to be complacent. Empowering women who play an equal role in our society and in food systems in particular is a moral imperative. But for those who are still not convinced, it also makes economic sense, as the report by the panel and other publications show. Until we have achieved true gender equality and to see this objective materialize on the ground, we must put women at the center of food systems transformation, as the report invites us to do. Let me close by saying that as a woman and a mother of a daughter, of whom I'm very proud, for she is brilliantly engaged in environment protection, including education in that field, which is absolutely basic, and as well to safeguard our rich cultural patrimony, this report, this topic is particularly close to my heart. But I want to stress that this is not a report about women for women. This report is in fact of particular importance to men. So allow me to pay tribute to our male colleagues and partners here with us today. You play an incredibly important role in ensuring that lasting gender equality is achieved. So I encourage you to listen, to reflect, and to step up. I congratulate the panel and its research team on another important policy report and wish us all interesting and constructive deliberations today. I look forward to hearing now from our experts on the 5 thematic fireside chats. Thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for an inspiring and incisive response to the launch of the report. At this point, I would like to invite my colleague, Dr. Lai Butake, to introduce a video. I'm informed that there is a video to be played. Dr. Butake, you have the floor.
Almost 2/3 of women in Africa are employed in agri-food systems. Food crop producers, agro-dealers and agripreneurs, processors and distributors, they work alongside catering to the nutrition, health and well-being of their families. Troubling fact: women's capacity to shape resilient, sustainable food systems and contribute to their transformation is severely hindered by social and systemic challenges. Women and girls around the world are sounding alarms on the discrimination they face across the board. Africa has not escaped this calls for action, neither has its food systems. Women in Africa are more likely than men to be food insecure. Lack of access to land, inputs, information and technology, finance, and employment opportunities severely undermines women's role in food systems. Gender inequality is both the cause and a consequence of food insecurity. Tackling the inequalities facing women is not just a moral imperative, but an economic incentive. There have been some continental-level efforts evidencing commitment to gender equality. Some relevant policy frameworks include the Strategy for Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment, the Declaration on Land Issues and Challenges in Africa, the African Union's Gender Policy, and the Protocol to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights on the Rights of Women in Africa. Still, significant challenges remain. Transforming food systems to be more inclusive will require approaches that enable women to make their own choices, participate, and benefit equally within food systems. Achieving this requires learning from best practices across the continent for replication and scaling of gender-inclusive policies. The 12th report of the Malabo Montpellier panel seeks to highlight government actions that are driving progress in empowering women and strengthening their meaningful participation in food systems. Bridging the gap. Policy innovations to put women at the center of food system transformation in Africa draws on the experience of 4 systematically selected countries: Ethiopia, Ghana, Rwanda, and Togo, focusing on their policy and institutional innovations driving systems-level change and transformation. The Malabo Montpellier panel of experts makes a couple of critical recommendations. African policy frameworks leverage a strong track record of commitments by the African Union and regional bodies to enhance women's position in society and in the food systems through coherent action. Inclusive behavioral change to accelerate the transition to non-discriminatory governance structures at all levels. Programming interventions must also sensitize boys and men to the challenges that undermine the empowerment of girls and women to foster an understanding of why gender equality is mutually beneficial. Political representation to address deeply rooted systemic inequalities and to ensure that policies are designed to meet the specific needs of women. Women must be equally represented at all levels of government in decision-making processes and food system services. As Africa approaches its post-Malabo Declaration era, we are delighted to present to you a policymaker's playbook for insights into comprehensive, gender-inclusive, and evidence-based interventions to empower women to shape the food systems they want. Here's wishing you an enjoyable read.
Wonderful. Thank you very much to the IT team for that seamless transition. Now we switch gears to the quick-fire fireside chats. It's my pleasure to invite Dr. Ismahan El-Wafi, the Chief Scientist of the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization. Now, Dr. El-Wafi, based on what you've heard from the presentations and the response from Her Excellency the Ambassador, are there any main observations that you've learned over the course of your career? Of course, before your role at the United Nations, you were the Director General of the International Biosaline Center. So you have the science, and now you're working in diplomacy and public policy. Do you have any lessons or observations that you've garnered that could increase women's participation in research? And also, how confident are you about the current research agenda towards meeting this capacity, the capacity needs of women, and increasing their participation in building resilient food systems? Over to you.
Thank you very much, DBC, and really thank you to Cheryl for the great presentation, to Her Excellency the Ambassador for bringing up and shedding light on some of the information from Morocco and some of the data from Morocco, and also to the Malabo Montpellier panel for tackling this subject. The subject is very, very timely, and it comes just after we have launched the status of women in agri-food system just about a few weeks ago. And if you remember, we didn't have a status of women in agri-food system for over almost 10 years. And I want to start with citing some of the numbers from this status of women in agri-food system that was published by FAO. And what it shows really in that report is that women really are taking part of the agri-food system in a much larger percentage than we thought, particularly in the least and middle income countries. So the numbers shows that globally, we have about 38% of women, working women that are employed in agri-food system, about the same as men globally. But when we zoom on Africa, we find about 66% of working women in sub-Saharan Africa are in the agri-food system. You look at Asia, and it's a very large number. And what it says that women are getting their livelihood from the agri-food system. And hence, if we are talking about transformation, we better engage them much more than what we thought before. We always take the things 50-50 because that's how the population on the planet Earth is. But when you look with these numbers on the agri-food system, it shows that the transformation can only happen if you really engage and empower the women to be part of it. Now, going back to the report of the Malabo Montpellier report, I agree with everything that was said in the report. And I think really the identification of the 8 recommendation, it's very important. They feed into each other. And if I wanna look mostly at the step up for STEMs, what I wanna really underline here, the BC, is that it starts definitely at the education level. And I think the report said it very clearly. We need to invest more in education of girls, very, very much so. We need to invest more in providing the tools. When we talk about STEM, talk about wet labs. So you can't get a kid, be it a woman or a man, a girl or a boy, to be interested in something that they cannot try themselves. So investment in education system as a whole, be it on teachers, be it on labs and infrastructure, be it on tools, it's very important. The good news is that all of this could be really, we can leapfrog this by using the digital tools. So the latest development in terms of artificial intelligence, machine learning, digital tools, all of this should allow us to do it much more quicker than what we thought earlier. And we have really, Africa particularly has really to step up their investment, but also use very wisely the digital tools to bridge this gap, particularly in remote areas. And that takes us a little bit to a component on connectivity. As a matter of fact, the only one of the good news in that report is that one of the numbers that we have seen a better improvement in terms of percentage of women with connectivity is the number on connectivity. So it says that women between 2018 and 2022, we had an increase of about 10% in terms of connectivity of women. It's still, women are still less connected to internet than men, but the gap, the gap in terms of connectivity, it's getting filled. So the other area that I think really we have to talk about, it's really the leaking pipeline. So numbers again shows that at the education level, including at the university level, we are getting into parity numbers in many countries to some extent, particularly actually in the MENA region. And as a matter of fact, UNESCO as well bring the numbers of girls in mathematics and physics or engineering, where we see very large number, particularly in the Arab countries. So some of the numbers that were quite interesting for me when I was searching this particular subject is that some of the proportion of female engineering graduates, it's very high in the Arab states, and there you could find Morocco with 42%, Oman with 43%, Syria with 44%, again, Tunisia with 44%. And you see it as well in small countries in Latin America, like Cuba, it's 48%, and Uruguay, it's 46%. So we are seeing a little bit of a good story, particularly in terms of engineering and STEMs. But let me take you to the next stages. So if we do it at very early age, if we invest in education, if we take really the digital tools to leapfrog accessibility and leapfrog learning of those kids and those teens on the science, the other area that we have to address is bringing them to the workforce and making sure that they take leadership position. Because unless you have women in leadership position, you can't really get to that parity very quickly. And that's where political representation is very important, and engagement in terms of management and leadership. And then I have a number from the MENA region that I did search on when I was at ICBA, as ICBA DG Debisi, as you said, when we started the AULA, the Arab Women Leadership in Agricultural Sciences. And there, based on our research back in 2017-16, it was that we got parity in the university in many of the subjects related to agri-food system, but then that 50% goes down to about 35% in the workforce in science, and then goes down to about 2% when you talk about senior leadership position. And that's really the leaky pipe that we need to stop. Right. That leaky pipe has a lot to do with policies and support from the society and from this whole ecosystem. Sorry, DBC, you were saying that.
No problem. Thank you very much, Dr. Alafi. And I think there's a lot that we can learn from you and your journey and what you've done in the various roles that you've occupied that other countries can adopt, whether it's at the institutional level, we're approaching this convergence of 50-50 parity. But then as we get into practice and go into senior levels of leadership, we still have a long way to go to get that balance. Thank you very much for your interventions. I would like to switch to Dr. Anna Lartey, Professor of Nutrition at the University of Ghana. Dr. Lartey, what adjustments, in your opinion, are needed to ensure that women's needs and concerns are mainstreamed in nutrition policies and programs? Please unmute your, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for this opportunity to be on the panel. I also add my voice in congratulating the panel for this seminal report. I think that the report has highlighted some of the challenges that women are facing, the inequalities we've seen. And I think one of the things that came out, and the other presenters have talked about, which I would also want to highlight, is the formal education to women. The truth is that people like us would not be here. If you look at our background, where we came from, we would not be here without the formal education. It's actually something that we should not play with, that every girl, every woman must be given education. That is one way we can get women's voice at the table. It's very crucial. Not only that, giving women formal education, women with this kind of education have better nutritional status for themselves and also for their children. Look at all the demographic and health surveys reports in countries. Look at, decipher it by gender or disaggregate it. And you see that women with education have better nutritional status for themselves and also for their children. We have talked about a lot of the challenges. That's the challenges that currently have not been brought out, even pushed under the carpet. There are a lot of taboos against women. Taboos like certain foods they shouldn't eat. If we want to improve the nutritional status, we should tackle some of these taboos, where some of the nutritious foods are taken away from women. They're told, especially it happens at a very crucial time of their life cycle, that they couldn't eat some nutritious foods. Already they are deficient in micronutrient, for example, and the foods that are supposed to bring up their status, for example, animal source foods, women sometimes taboos prevent them from taking it. Not only that, there are also other areas we need to look at. Women's access to credit and land has been mentioned. Sometimes it's like a catch-22. We're going to improve women, we want to improve their status, and yet they don't have access to resources. They go to get loans and all, they say bring a collateral. No collateral. How do you improve yourself when you have no access to land, to resources, and you don't have anything to present as collaterals? All of this must be looked at. So until recently, the nutrition of adolescents was off the agenda. Thank God now it has come up that we need to pay attention to the adolescents, because it has intergenerational effects. When adolescents have poor nutritional status, they become women with poor nutritional status, they give birth to stunted children become stunted adolescents, and then the cycle goes on and on and on. So we really need to look at that, also look at adolescents. Let's not leave them out. The other thing is that, when we talk about women's nutrition, sometimes we pay attention, we link women's nutrition only to her reproductive roles. Women in their own right, also their nutrition must be considered, not only linked to their reproductive roles. Now, this is not to say that their reproductive roles are not important. It is important, but we should also remember that women in their own right are also entitled to good nutrition, irrespective of their reproductive roles. So I want to make some 3 points that we should do to mainstream this. One, let's realize that the harmful effects of malnutrition on women go beyond her, into the next generation. And therefore, we really need to pay attention to women's nutrition. Now, the second is that one of the ways we can empower women within the food systems or not, whether in food systems or not, we have to give them access to formal education. And I've mentioned that. I think women will be empowered. When they're empowered with good nutrition or good education, they become better food systems actors. And then third, we must probably look at setting up a fund specifically to support women within the food systems, so that they don't compete, so that they can easily get access to what they need. And we should not put women at small level. Let's find ways by which we can really raise them to high levels so that they can properly scale up their efforts. I think we have enough information. It's good to gather data and all of that to show, but I think we have enough information so that we can really move. And I think we should probably get to the point where we can mobilize African leaders to put a strong voice for women in the food systems. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Lartey. The need to acknowledge that malnutrition is multi-generational and multi-dimensional. We need to enforce or improve access to education and, of course, create the fund to support women. We have a representative of Africa's premier banking institution who will come on later to share her thoughts on how this is happening. Right now, I would like to invite Mrs. Ndidi Okonkwo-Nwuneli, the founder of Africa Food Changemakers. She wears quite a few hats. I think this is just one of many, one of my favorite people on the continent. Ndidi, are you online? I don't see you spotlighted, so I'm not sure.
I'm
okay.
Here.
Hi. So you've heard the previous speakers. You heard the presentation. To start up or upgrade their agribusinesses, women need training in financial literacy, entrepreneurship, business management, amongst other areas. In your opinion, because you have skin in the game, one of your titles is chairperson of ACE Foods. How can access to these be improved for women, and how do these trainings and business development support, how can they be tailored to cater more towards the needs and expectations of women in Africa?
Thank you so much. And I join everyone in congratulating you, the APC and the entire team for an excellent report. And congratulating you also on the research and the pioneering research, because data is critical to make policy changes happen. Now, I really believe that investing in women entrepreneurs, especially agro-processors, is critical to the value chain. We have historically focused on female farmers who are critical, as well as logistics providers, female retailers at the markets. But the agro-processors, we often call them the hidden middle, and they are pivotal. Why are they pivotal? Because of what you surfaced in your report, the high rates of post-harvest losses, the high rates of malnutrition, which was just discussed, and the fact that we are still dependent on rate-fed agriculture. We need value addition. And so this is where we have been working through Africa Food Changemakers by providing training, support, market linkages, exposure, and increasing the visibility of female entrepreneurs. And through 2 programs I'll just talk about, because I don't believe in talking about problems, I believe in talking about solutions. We have a program right now, which you are supporting, sir, on sustainability and greening businesses, because our agro-processors are most affected by climate change, and they need the skills, the tools, and the support to surmount this serious global challenge. Now, financing and climate financing for women is only at 2%. And so as we start funds and grow funds around climate financing, we have to have a gender lens. And I actually believe in explicitly having a gender quota. And I'll say that in the next 2 years, let's commit to at least 30% of climate financing for agro-processors to be channeled to female entrepreneurs who are involved in value addition. If we don't set 30% as a target, we will not even achieve 10%. So my hope is that by 2030, we'll be at the 50% mark, where we'll be fully equitable with gender financing. And I'm more optimistic about gender financing because it's a new pot of money, right? It's not traditional financing linked to land, 10 years, etc., which we know women will never be able to match because they just don't have access to land. They don't have access to buildings as collateral. So let's look at climate financing as a new form of financing where we have the opportunity to do it right. There is a lot of climate financing coming into our space. So that's number one. Number two, training. Now, through Africa Food Change Makers, we're scaling up our enterprises, helping them grow from micro to small, small to medium, medium to large. And we're tracking this especially for women entrepreneurs and ensuring not only that they get support through practical skills, but also mentoring, and we're matching them with bodies. So just this year, we launched a Leading Women in a Food Fellowship because we believe that African women in food have to get the support, the visibility, the training, the exposure, and we have to raise their profiles. So this food fellowship, we started with 27 women leaders from 15 African countries, and we're so excited because they are just the next generation of women leaders who are going to transform the sector. And we're calling them disruptors and ecosystem enablers and narrative changers because we want them to be the new face. And we need to partner with many other people around the table and in this forum to scale this type of work, to ensure that we have not just Ndidi Nwuneli, but we have millions of Ndidi Nwunelis across the continent saying we're making change happen and we're scaling our businesses, we're creating jobs, and we have the skills and tools. So we have e-learning curriculum, and we're happy to partner with all of you to get that curriculum into your schools, into your programs, and into every industry association that's associated with a value chain, because we need to strengthen our ecosystem associations and our value chain associations, and value chain investing and value chain training is critical. And then the final thing I'll say is that we need policy to support a lot of this work. Many of our countries have regressed in the last decade when it comes to gender equity. There are few examples like Rwanda that were profiled in your report that are shining examples of equity, but we really know that in many of our countries, the windows have actually shut. And so we need policymakers to set quotas around each of these market linkages, support around financing, support around training, extension workers to ensure the market linkages are happening, but also trade. And as we think about the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement and how to make sure there's a gender lens through that, where value addition is happening, and we have women at the forefront of food trade in Africa, we need to set quotas on that and hold our representatives accountable. So I'll end here. I'm actually in Morocco, and I'm here actually partnering with a university here around changing narratives. And I think your report is really the first step. We need to change narratives. And the next report should really about how we celebrate and scale success stories in our ecosystem. Because unless we start changing narratives around the role of women in agriculture and celebrating what is working, we will not see women as agents of their own change and they're agents of their own transformation. And I look forward to partnering with all of you to change narratives, to celebrate future successes and milestones. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Ndidi Okonkwo-Nwuneli. So these 3 points, the 30% of climate financing geared towards or targeted towards women entrepreneurs. We need to improve investments in training. And of course, we need to create the right policy environment. We look forward to hearing more successes from you, and of course, how other countries can learn from what you're doing, take it to Morocco, but take it across the continent. I would like to invite Dr. Dorothy Okello, the Dean of the School of Engineering at Makerere University. Of course, she's also a member of the Malabo Montpellier panel. Dr. Okello, are you on?
Yes, Debisi, I'm on.
Wonderful.
I hope you can hear me fine.
Loud and clear, loud and clear. Thank you for following the proceedings. I have just one question for you. Based on your work as the Dean of the faculty and all the wonderful work that you're doing in supporting female entrepreneurship, are there good practices that you can think of from African countries where they're leveraging digital products to enhance women's empowerment and their participation in food systems? What's your perspective on that?
Yes, thank you very much, Debisi. And first of all, a good day to everyone. and I'd like to join in thanking all the presenters that have spoken ahead of me and laid this issue out. And from the School of Engineering, I really do also want to build on what we had earlier from FAO in terms of the opportunities for the digital opportunity and what we have going across Africa in terms of the digital transformation, because that's where I want to pick my examples from. First of all, I want to flag also in terms of the action points where we have the Africa consolidating, starting off with consolidating Africa policy frameworks. I do want to highlight what we have in place already, the Africa Digital Transformation Action Plan, okay? And using this as a framework to share more of the examples that I see. Because one, it has the 3 pillars. One is the issue of the infrastructure. Okay, and here we have a number of examples what is happening in our countries in terms of both the rollout of connectivity and the numbers were already shared, but also programs that we have that are addressing connectivity to the underserved or the unserved. And a lot of this will be addressing rural areas, and this is where the bulk of the women are. So that is a good initiative, and I can share that for example, at the university, there's a project we have worked on in terms of addressing rural broadband connectivity and having a mix of both young female researchers and male researchers on this team and going out there. And that's very important because when you're trying to reach out in these spaces, number one, if we're talking about digitization, if we're talking about STEM, I'll try to bring in some of the other action points that we're looking at. We need the young girls to see themselves in the people who are rolling out the technology. So yes, we want to roll out the infrastructure and all, but how are we doing it? And how are we showcasing and role modeling the opportunities for both male and female? The other issue is in the issue of digital skills. And we have a number of initiatives where you have a Code for Her, Code for Girls, Girls for Girls programs, where you have training and digital skilling or upskilling as other opportunities in which we can then further use the opportunity for technology. And I want to sing out a project as well where you have partnerships with women farmers and women farmers being trained on how they can take better advantage of the technology, because the technology not only opens up their spaces, opens up markets and other opportunities, but if the women are also using the technology, it also helps them in terms of the time labor constraints that have also emerged from this. And in terms of adoption of digitalization, again, examples have been shared in terms of the opportunity that, for example, mobile money brings to the table and how that opens up. So we have projects that have been worked on, for example, using AI. And again, that's the presentation from FAO. I was like, okay, thank you so much. You've really laid a good foundation for me, where we have looking at AI and simple tools for a mobile-based phone that we can use for people or women farmers or other farmers in general, I would say, take pictures and then have this database run quickly through and help identify what is the disease that we are being challenged with and all. And this is important because sometimes when you're trying to describe, my leaves are going black, to an expert, what shade of black is it? Is it spotted? Is it whatever? And so here we have tools that can save several images and then run through and give some very quick feedback back on this. So I think that the examples that we see and the opportunity, the other thing I mentioned, I start to be corrected, but we have very many schools that are teaching people about ICT schools, but I'm yet to find schools teaching people about how to use mobile money. So that shows that when we work the technology right, when we get the opportunity right, we are actually opening up the space, and digitization is a great platform for us to work, and at the policy level and at the continental level in terms of harmonization that we're talking about in this report, we already have the action plan at Africa level that we can leverage to really support the use of digitization in improving food systems and the opportunities for women. I think I will stop at this point for now. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Okello. And we look forward to more innovations coming out of Makerere University. Thank you for the leadership that you are providing in this space. I would like to wrap up the fireside chat by inviting Dr. Agnes Kalibata, President of the Alliance for Green Revolution in Africa, of course, also a member of the Malabo Montpellier panel, to give her thoughts on the final question. Dr. Kalibata, we've heard from the reports that several African governments have shown strong political will to empower women in agriculture transformation. However, rarely do we find the political will translating into tangible actions or results. For example, out of the 51 member countries that reported against the CAADP Performance Indicator 4.4, women participation in agriculture in the third biennial review, only 10 countries are on track. We know a lot more can be done, but based on your experience, not just in your role as president of AGRA, but also as someone who has occupied in a cabinet role as a minister of agriculture in Rwanda, what do you think needs to be done to strengthen the representation of women in political and agri-food leadership positions?
Thank you, Debisi, and good to see you. Let me start by thanking Shreya Hendricks, and the report was unbelievable. It touches a whole lot of things, but also thanking Professor Joachim and Guzman for the leadership they provided with the Malabo Montpellier panel that really keeps bringing this cutting edge information to us. Now, to the question you're asking, Debisi, I just really feel happy to be coming after a number of women that have highlighted very powerful things that are happening in our ecosystem. And I just wanted to call out 3 because it's talking about food systems, and the temptation not to do that would be unbelievable. 1, we still have only 17% of women, of the people in research, all the leadership you see in research, science and research, only 17% is women. Still very, very far from where it should be. When you look at all the policy documents that get put out there, building on Ismail's discussion and the report they did, of the documents they assessed across 68 countries, only 19 documents out of 75% of the documents they assessed had policy on gender inclusion. So we are not being very deliberate around including women. But also when I look at the work we are doing in agriculture, less than 15% of the extensionists are women, and less than 5% of women are getting access to extension. So the challenge, we've made lots of progress. I appreciate the progress we've made, but the challenge remains huge. Here in AGRA, the work we are doing with the smallholder farmers, we continue to see that women are not getting the level of access to extension that we would like. Women are not showing up in the levels of leadership we'd like them to show up. But more importantly, from a business perspective, where we now have are working with Value for Hand, have over 3,000 women businesses on that platform, you still see a 34% gap in how women access financing. And that's because we still have a lot of policies that will not favor women. So the question you're asking really is what needs to be done and what have I learned in the process that can help inform where we are going. And there are 3 things I just want to mention. We still have lots of formal and informal structures that constrain equity, and we have to address those challenges. I remember when I was appointed to the Food System Summit, first of all, to be appointed, I guess I even asked myself whether it would have been possible if I wasn't being appointed by a woman, because the first thing I put on the table, I said, listen, I have young children. I cannot go to Rome to do this work. And I could hear the hesitation for a minute, but with the second minute, definitely Amina Mohammed came back saying, no, you can do it in Nairobi. Never mind that the rest of the world feels that I should do it in Rome, but you need that type of leadership to be able to move women issues. There are norms, like I guess Ismail called out earlier, lots of norms around women and women leadership that we need to overcome and be able to give women opportunities to come up in leadership sooner. And this won't happen unless the political systems that allow this. And when political systems do not allow women leadership, it's possible, and it's actually true in a lot of research, the women needs and women preferences get left on the table. So it doesn't matter that we have so many women in ag, you still find that research that should speak to the things that women care about, now we now call them orphaned crops, for example, does not get the right level of attention that it should get. So it's really important. But now, what did we do? What are we doing? So from here at AGRA, maybe if I just mention at AGRA first, we are doing two things at AGRA that we feel are very critical. We've just made sure that a certain percent of our budget, not just including women, because everybody is farming, no, a certain percent of our budget will go towards ensuring women outcomes. So that's number one. Number two, we are taking on work on youth, and 50% of the numbers of youth we will be reporting against will be women. Number three, we've very intentionally taken on women businesses so that we can be very intentional around how we remove barriers to access to finance, barriers to access to markets, barriers to access to information, all the things that Ndidi talked about that we need to be working with and ensuring that women in businesses are not failing fast, that actually they have an opportunity to be able to close that 34% gap that we've seen. So it's really important to have women leaders to be able to advance women leadership. I'll tell you that when I was in Rwanda, something you called on, as Minister of Agriculture, my ministry was the first ministry to do gender-based budgeting. I made sure that within my ministry, we could actually show that a certain percent of the budget is going to go towards ensuring that women, and we have women outcomes that demonstrate how to come through on gender issues. So yes, for me, all the things I've talked about, but really, most importantly, let's provide the space, whether we provide it through quotas, whether we provide it through intentional frameworks, as the African Union has done, putting a framework in place, but ensure that we go the extra mile to have clear indicators that help us deliver across those frameworks, or whether as women, we get that space and provide that space further to ensure that women leadership and women opportunities become more. The question is clear. If we don't have women leadership on the table, it's going to be very difficult to advance women issues. So thank you for the opportunity, and I hope this brings some contribution.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kalibata. I think emphasizing that we're dealing with cultural issues, issues that are more systemic. They're not just technical. This is not plug and play. So we need persistent vigilance to ensure that we achieve these outcomes. And thank you for sharing all the innovative approaches that you are currently deploying at AGRA, and also that you invested in when you were a Minister of Agriculture in Rwanda. At this point, I would like to invite His Excellency Haile Mariam Desalegn to deliver his remarks. Your Excellency, are you there? Wonderful. Good to see you, sir. Please unmute your microphone. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Davis. Can you hear me? Oh, thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, Excellency, my fellow forum co-chair, Ambassador Alawi, thank you very much for steering this very important topic of our continent, especially. And honorable ministers and senior representatives of the African countries present here today, dear panel co-chairs, Professor Von Braun and Dr. Badiane, and members of the Malabo Montpellier panel, distinguished panelists, friends. I'm very pleased to speak to you today on this very important and pressing topic. I was delighted to see that the Malabo Montpellier panel took the initiative to address women in Africa's agri-food systems through its latest report, which captures the basic issues that should come into light. As farmers, businesswomen, mothers, innovators, researchers, workers, and educators, women are critical actors in Africa's agri-food systems, which I witnessed myself, with better access to education, finance, technology, land rights, which is very essential, and to leadership positions. Women will be much more empowered to their own benefit and that of society as a whole, as all the panelists has mentioned, some of the points raised. Given that the focus of the Malabo Montpellier panel is on governance systems, how policy and institutional innovations shape and contribute to the transforming of our food systems, I look forward to the policy roundtable to hear from senior government representatives of several African countries. And I think as leaders, we should come forward to showcase that what our countries are doing and at the policy level. There is a strong track record of commitments by the African Union and regional bodies, regional economic communities to enhance women's position in society and in our food systems. Of course, I was happy to see that my country is one of the 4 systematically identified countries studied in the report and has been performing quite well against the related CADIP indicator. In the beginning, the new administration has brought at least 50% of the cabinet members women. And our parliament also has around 40%. So this is a big shift, and I commend for that. The commitments to enhance women's position in agriculture and food systems need to be coherently brought together in a way that good intentions translate into tangible outcomes on the ground. The African commitments to the UN Food System Summit, which my president, Agnes, has led, and the follow-up of this Food System Summit provide a basis for that. In addition, the continent is preparing to define the post-Malabo agenda. They call it Malabo 2. Meetings have been taking place in Morocco and Zambia in this respect already. We must make sure that gender equality is deeply anchored in our African development agenda. This must include the allocation of dedicated funding, as Agnes was saying, in government's budgets, as well as affirmative policy measures to increase resources access and asset holdings of women. Given that both food systems and gender equality cut across sectoral ministries, meaningful cooperation across ministries is crucial for effective implementation. And I call upon the top leadership, presidents and prime ministers, to do that as much as they can, considering the sectors of food and agriculture, education, health and economy, and even justice. The justice sector is also very important as far as women are concerned. This must be coupled with a deliberate programming of interventions that promote equality and equity access, all aspects of food systems, and that also promotes sustainable food systems growth and transformation. Women and gender considerations can no longer be an afterthought to programming. They have to be at the core of interventions. I think the report has highlighted that clearly and boldly. We must act with a sense of urgency. We cannot afford, I think, morally or economically, to leave girls and women behind. and it must be facilitated that more women come in leadership positions at all levels of government and decision-making processes. Empowered women and gender equality in all aspects of life must be the goal. I echo what my fellow forum co-chair, Her Excellency Ambassador Aloy said earlier. Yes, we must celebrate the advances that have already been made, but we must not stop our efforts until women's equal participation everywhere has become the norm. In my family, I am the minority. You know, I have 3 daughters and my wife, but I have seen my daughters are super performing than most of the boys which I see in my surroundings. So if given access, I think they can do, and they can do the much better work this humanity needs. So for that, affirmative policies, strong political will, not only political will, but political action and leadership are all crucial to pinpoint and then eliminate persistent discriminatory structures. I look forward to hearing and learning from the achievements that are already being made on the continent. And my hope is that the conversations today and the report by the panel will emphasize the urgency and elevate this discussion to a top policy priority for African leaders. I think with that, I would like to thank you for your attention and hand back to you, Mr. Chair, and thank you and God bless you all.
Thank you very much for those very concise remarks, Your Excellency Haile Mariam Desalegn, Chairperson of the board, the Alliance for Green Revolution in Africa. At this point, I would like to invite Dr. Wanjiru Kamal-Rutenberg, the executive in residence at Schmidt Futures, also a member of the Malabo Montpellier panel. We have quite a few members, if not all members in attendance today, to moderate a roundtable with country representatives. Before I bring this session, commence the session, I would like to say that for those who have questions to ask, please type your questions in the Q&A, and then Dr. Kamal-Rutenberg will entertain them at the end of her session. Wanjiru, you have the floor.
Thank you, everyone. Allow me to stand on existing protocol, recognizing our honored guests, and just express my pleasure, delight, and honor at getting to moderate this session. And allow me to jump right into it because we have esteemed representatives of governments. I'm going to start with focusing on some of the case study countries, beginning with a representative from the government of Ghana. Now, the government of Ghana has made commendable efforts to create an enabling environment to unleash women's creative potential in entrepreneurship and initiated massive social protection programs to allow vulnerable women to actively participate in the national socio-economic life. However, women in Ghana still face obstacles to being on equal footing with men, including unequal access to opportunities and productive resources such as land, technology, and finance. Today, I hope we're lucky to have Ms. Paulina Addy, who's the Director of Women in Agricultural Development of the Ministry of Food and Agriculture, Government of Ghana. Ms. Addy, are you with us?
Yes, I am here.
I'm delighted to have you. I have a couple of questions for you. The first is, how does your government focus on socio-cultural roles and responsibilities, which often remain at the heart of women's inequality in society? And actually, if I could tag that along with another question of whether there are specific programs that address the role of men and boys in achieving gender equality, especially around behavioral change. So, it'd be wonderful to hear lessons learned and experiences from the Ghanaian example.
Thank you very much. And it's a privilege to be part of this program. And Excellencies from Ghana, the government works through policies and programs to target our women. And we have heard from the study, but there are some nuances which as policymakers, we try to also influence. For instance, we have a coveted position for a national best farmer every year. And it goes to the men because it is tied so much to land. But then as a woman person, we'll also have to influence those decisions to create that space for women to also have that coveted position. So we have a space for women best farmers every year. And now we're also adopting the value chain approach. Otherwise, everything will be skewed towards production. And even in the production space, we still influence policies. We have been able to train women tractor operators, which is a normal area for men, a terrain for men, but we are getting very positive reports from where these women have been attached. They are so careful with the machinery and they are working very well. That notwithstanding, we're also looking at the very small holders. There are women who have been very resilient over time. They are not so much focusing on improved planting material or seed, but they keep seed which they grow year in, year out, and they are able to produce what they are supposed to produce within their space. There are also those who are generating organic fertilizer. We have had a lot of issues since the war between Russia, Ukraine, where we're getting a lot of inorganic fertilizer. But there are women initiatives springing up and then generating these to support agri-food systems. And these are things we don't forget. I also want to brush over our dedicated funding for our regional gender action plans, where we dedicate 10% of budgetary allocation to support women's work. Other than that, nothing is going to happen in that space. So in as much as we develop policies, programs, as a woman's spokesperson, we also try to influence some of these policies so our women will see the light of day. I would also want to venture into the research space. We have what we call in Ghana, the Research Extension Liaison Committee, which research is a platform for researchers and farmers. But now we brought in women who are into the post-production segment of the value chain. If we had not done so, we would have forgotten about what they contribute. And now with value addition issues, it's good to have allies who would make sure policy implementation is on track. And I can mention NetRight, WILDAF, who have been tracking policy implementation, and the right noise is made where it has to be. In addition, we also push for our women to be part of radio programs because we don't have the numbers for extension. We have gone digital. So we want our women to be there. Otherwise, we're going to talk only about production and we won't have our women's issues reflected. And same for the Research Extension Liaison Committee, where we have brought in agri-food processors. We also have been able to form ties with agencies like the Food and Drugs Authority, where progressive registration of facility and product takes them or their product to where it should be for them to rake in the needed income. And these are some of the pluses. We mentioned the MASLOC during the study, but I would want to also talk about the Ghana Enterprises Agency, which has a myriad of opportunities, especially for women within the agri-business space. And they are getting some funding to turn their fortunes around. And we need to push, otherwise we will rely on our policies, which take time to review and things don't move the way we want. So in as much as we have policies and programs, we also do influence to ensure women get the needed space. With the men, yes, we tag them along because we've had a lot of hitbacks. Why are we focusing on women when we are talking about gender? Yes, we need the men to also understand where we are coming from. So with the Ministry of Gender, we have a dedicated ministry for gender, children, and social protection. There's also some focus on men and boys to deepen the understanding of the masculinity, which is a program which they conduct every now and then. And even for us within the agricultural space, we reach out to both the men and women so they know why we are targeting women for specific programs. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that in-depth mapping of what the government of Ghana is doing, and especially surfacing is that interministerial collaboration and coordination. At this point, allow me to shift to and travel to Rwanda, where I believe we have representatives from the government of Rwanda. Rwanda is walking the talk on women's empowerment agenda. The Constitution reserves 30% of seats to women in decision-making from central to decentralized entities. Women currently represent 61.3% of parliament, and the 2022 Global Gender Gap Report of the World Economic Forum ranked Rwanda as the 6th country globally and the first in Africa in bridging gender gaps. Congratulations. Do we have Ms. Mireille Batamuliza, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Gender and Family Promotion?
Yes, I'm around.
Wonderful to have you, Your Excellency. A question for you is, how did the reforms implemented in Rwanda play a role in the economic empowerment of women? And if you can please tell us a bit about how you managed to overcome the social norms, which we know hinder women's empowerment in general.
Yeah, thank you, moderator. Oh, I can see my room is not working well with the lights.
We are delighted to have you, nonetheless.
Great. Yeah, as you said, Rwanda has made remarkable progress to promote gender equality and women empowerment and girls. So far, the reforms implemented in Rwanda have played significant role in the economic empowerment of women, and has also enhanced social development and the overall well-being of women in Rwanda. So I can start with the reforms made from the 2003 constitution that was amended in 2015, which secures that 30% of women representation at all decision-making instances, to the universal access to education and health, as well as laws that were granting equal rights for girls and boys to inherit family properties. So for the impacts, I can cite few, and the progressive land tenure that was mentioned in the report has empowered women by providing them with secure land rights, enabling them to engage in productive agricultural activities. So far, women's access to land tremendously contributed to the control over the productive resources, as mentioned, and access to loans using land titles as collaterals. In 2019, this number was at 38% women accessing to credits. In terms of education and skills development, Rwanda has prioritized girls' education and skills development, enabling women to acquire the knowledge and capabilities needed for the economic empowerment. As we all agree, the education is a foundation for the development of any society. So in Rwanda, we have seen an increased access to quality education that equipped women with the skills necessary for entrepreneurship and leadership positions, and participation in diverse economic sectors, including modern agriculture. So the gender parity in education has been stable at primary and secondary level of education. And we are now seeing girls joining STEM and TVET at 46% and 43% respectively. For the innovation, we talked about much about the innovation and technology. Rwanda has embraced the potential in technology and innovation in empowering women economically. By leveraging technology, women have been able to overcome traditional barriers to tap into new economic opportunities. We have seen initiatives such as mobile banking, e-commerce platforms, and digital agriculture information services that have expanded women's access to markets. So for this, Rwanda is then, we can say that Rwanda is a living example that showcases that women's representation in higher leadership and decision-making positions as at parliament and the cabinet can contribute a lot to make necessary reforms that positively impact the socio-economic and well-being of women and the society in general. So as I conclude, it's important to note, you have asked how we managed to overcome the gender norms. I wanted to note that overcoming social norms is a complex and long-term process, and it requires a multifaceted approach, sustained efforts, and collaboration among various stakeholders, including government, civil society, and communities, as well as individuals. My colleague from Ghana has mentioned a lot on men engaged, and I wouldn't really put another contribution to this. So as I had time to present, I would thank everyone that invited us at the Ministry of Gender and Family Promotion in Rwanda. And I couldn't end this presentation without inviting you for the Women Deliver Conference that Rwanda is hosting in July. I thank you and I submit.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency, for highlighting the fact that norms change is a long journey, but a critical one, and also the role that constitutions and legal frameworks play in advancing equality. At this point, we are absolutely honored to have with us His Excellency Dr. Ildefonse Musafiri, Minister of Agriculture and Animal Resources, also again in the government of Rwanda. And for you, Honorable Minister, as we celebrate Rwanda's leading, really being a leading light on the continent around gender equality, would you please elaborate for us how Rwanda is doing this and why Rwanda is such a front runner when it comes to women's empowerment, in particular with respect to agri-food systems? What are some of the initiatives or policies that you would really like to highlight? The floor is yours, Your Excellency.
So thank you, Moderator Dr. Wanjiru. Your Excellency, former President of Ethiopia, Your Excellency Eshia Ben Salah, co-chair of Malabo Declaration, Your Excellency Osmani Badiane, co-chair, Professor Fonny Brown, my own professor, and the co-chair of Malabo Montpellier panel, Dr. Agnes Karivata, my predecessor and president of AGRA, also member of Montpellier panel, honorable ministers and ladies and gentlemen. Let me start by wishing you a very good afternoon. First of all, I'm really delighted to participate in this important event on women's role in food system transformation in Africa. This topic is a forceful reminder of the role that African women play in our food systems. As we all know, almost 2/3 of women in Africa are employed in agri-food systems as food producers, They work as grow dealers, processors, distributors of food and other items, as well as traders. So these works are crucial for our nation's food security, as well as the continent's food security. For this reason, I think it is really important and critical that the necessary tools to succeed are available to women in Africa to speed the food system space. The current economic and geopolitical situations that we are living in today, including conflict, the war between Russia and Ukraine, that has disrupted international logistics, even food systems, hunger across Africa, stunting and undernourishment, even including the demographic pressure, are impacting on Africa's food systems. So we need to improve agriculture yield to make sure people have access to food as well as development. So this situation calls for international policies that are aiming to increasing food systems workforce by enhancing women participation and employment within these food systems. Let me, maybe, ladies and gentlemen, let me add on what the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Gender and Family Promotion has mentioned to just share what we are doing in Rwanda and under the vision leadership of our leader, His Excellency Paul Kagame, the President of the Republic of Rwanda, who has put gender in his development agenda. So as mentioned, I'm speaking mostly on agricultural component in which I'm the minister. So the government of Rwanda has allocated significant resources to the agricultural sector, which of course, as a part of the strategic plan for agricultural transformation. These are 4-5-year strategic plans, or last one was 7 years now. And the objective is to achieve target growth, increasing household income, and contribute to agricultural growth and eradicate rural poverty. So this strategic plan for agricultural transformation includes specific initiatives for women and youth, which are integrated into all priorities area of the plan. The evidence has shown that the mid-term assessment of PSTF4, which is the strategic plan for agricultural transformation, the acronyms we use, the assessment has revealed that every $1 invested in agriculture has resulted in a $2.05 gain in Rwanda's GDP, which is a very good indicator that investing in agriculture is crucial for economic development. The spending under agricultural transformation plan has helped 1.1 million individuals elevate their consumption above the poverty line, primarily in rural areas. The government of Rwanda has also prioritized the policies and reforms to empower women and enhance their role in the economy, as Mireille mentioned. Efforts include increasing women representing the parliament and the cabinet, and investing in the girls' education, as the report and the PS has mentioned. So in fact, women employment has been a part of, have been integrated part of the development agenda. And we have even included them in the decision-making process. The gender responsive budgeting guidelines as well are enforced to ensure women's needs and concerns are considered in public investment. As per the report, the revised land law of 2021 that has granted equal access to land for women in Rwanda, and the impact has even been highlighted by the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Gender and Family Planning. So this meeting, ladies and gentlemen, just come at the opportune time as Rwanda, we seek ideas and counsel for the development of our 5th strategic plan for agricultural transformation that now is aiming to ensure that the need and the concerns of women in the food systems are taken care of. I would like to close by thanking organizers for having invited me to this important meeting. And I can assure you that the proceedings of this meeting, as well as the recommendation from the report, will be considered, adopted, and integrated in Rwanda's food system transformation agenda. And I thank you so much for your kind attention.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. A lot of learning for all of us, for all our countries from the Rwandan experience, highlighting the role that budgeting and land law reform have played in driving and enabling Rwanda to really emerge as a leader in this field. At this point, I want to find out whether we have a representative from the Republic of Togo, the Honorable Minister for Agriculture. If the Minister for Agriculture is on, please let me know. But meanwhile, we will keep moving, and we've got, I believe, do we have from the Republic of Malawi, Mr. Fred Simwaka, the Director, Ministry of Gender, Social Welfare and Community Development. Are you present with us?
Yes, he's here. He's here.
Oh, fantastic. Mr. Simwaka, it would be wonderful to hear from your perspective, and especially from the Ministry of Gender, Social Welfare and Community Development, perspectives from the Malawi experience, lessons learned, and the ways in which the government of Malawi, and in particular your directorate, is working to drive women's leadership in agri-food systems.
Maybe, excuse me, facilitator.
Yes.
I'm Rodwell Mzonde from Minister of Agriculture. Maybe Mr. Smaka is not around.
Okay.
Or, yeah.
Okay. Mr. Simwaka is requesting the organizers to unmute. Unmute him.
Okay. So go ahead. Maybe I can come later.
Yes, yes. We shall hear two perspectives from the government of Malawi. Mr. Simwaka, are you able to, can we hear you now? Are you unmuted?
He is unmuted.
You are unmuted from our end. As we allow the technical team to figure out, maybe we can invite you, Dr. Rodwell Mzonde, who is the Director of Planning in the Ministry of Agriculture, to join us and share perspectives from the Republic of Malawi on your experiences in driving the gender agenda and women's leadership in agri-food systems in Malawi.
Thank you very much, the facilitator. I would recognize the ministers who are with us here and fellow participants. I would say that in Malawi, we are doing a lot in the sector, and we are also involving a lot of women in the drive to empower them. For example, we have affordable inputs program, which is providing the subsidized inputs to agriculture. And there, I think we do have a lot of beneficiaries. For example, last year or this year, which we are just concluding, we had 2.5 million beneficiaries. Out of that, 58 were women or female farmers. The issue is to assist them improve the production of food materials or agricultural produce so that they play a role in the agri-food system, because we believe women in Malawi are actively involved in the production of crops, including food crops. We have also another program to make sure that women as well as other farmers are actively involved. It's called Banana Production Program. I may hint that we lost our banana some time back because of banana top virus. But now we have outreach to almost 99,000 farmers who are participating in the production of bananas in Malawi. Out of that, 51% are female farmers. And some of them are even taking leadership roles in the cooperatives which are involved in this. We are also in the drive to increase irrigation agriculture in Malawi, knowing that we are faced with erratic weather or climate change in the country. And the target is to reach 220,000 hectares by 2035. But as of now, we are at 147,000 hectares. And for this season alone, we have developed 67,000 hectares. And out of that, we have female at a proportion of 54% of all who are involved in that irrigation development endeavor. We are also having the program to improve food nutrition. What we are trying to do is to provide protein to the farming communities, including the women. So what the program is doing is sharing or is giving out livestock units, goats, chicken, and other livestock units. In that respect, we think if they own the livestock, they can improve on food availability in terms of protein, but they can also improve their income by selling the units in case, for example, in our case of drought, definitely they are to rely on livestock as our main players in agriculture. We have had also the problem of commercializing agriculture. So we are on the program of agriculture commercialization, where the program is providing the farmers with matching grants. They can have that grant for inputs, machinery, and other things. But the beauty about it is, we are matching them with off-takers. So they are forming cooperatives. They are to develop certain value chains like soybean, the maize, and others. What is the important thing is that because of the program, we have improved their performance or capacity to produce more and more, and women in that regard are also topping the list. So we are sure that if we continue doing this, definitely women will also be seen to be doing a lot of things in boosting their economic status. Thank you, Madam Facilitator.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mzonde. Absolutely insightful and helpful information. I am struck by the role that cooperatives are playing in Malawi's progress, in Malawi's engagement in driving of women's leadership in agri-food systems. I wonder now if we have Mr. Simwaka back on the line.
Yes, I'm back on the line now.
Fantastic. It would be wonderful to have you again contribute and share a bit more about Malawi's experience, especially from the perspective of the Ministry of Gender, Social Welfare and Community Development. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much. Our main mandate is to ensure that women equally participate in all development endeavors. And fortunately, we work very, very closely with the Ministry of Agriculture. What we have been doing is, one, we have our national gender policy, which has got 8 priority areas. And among the priority areas, we have recognizing that Malawi is agro-based. Among the priority areas, we have the gender and agriculture, part of the gender in agriculture, food security and nutrition as a priority area to ensure that women also take the central part in uplifting their lives and contributing towards the economy of the country. I will talk firstly from the legal and policy frameworks. From there, in the ministry, we developed what we call the National Action Plan for Women Economic Empowerment. And this action plan, it is very, very holistic because we have priority areas which we have taken them from a holistic approach. And we have got 4 main priority areas in the National Action Plan. Number one, we feel that education is very, very important. So number one, we have got promotion of women, girls, and education and financial literacy, so that women are also empowered in terms of education and literacy. We also feel that because women take a larger part in participating or contributing towards labor force in the agricultural sector, we have the priority area which talks to facilitation of women's labor and empowerment. Also, we know that land is of essence, and we would like to have to ensure that women also take a fair share of ownership of land. So this priority area talks to enhancement of women's access and control of property, including the land itself. And then finally, in the National Action Plan, we have support for women's businesses so that women could also take the central part in terms of engaging in businesses. Malawi has, we believe that women are remaining behind or lagging behind because of maybe the negative norms. And in this case, what we have thought of is to bring in gender transformative approaches. And in this month, June, I think around 23rd, we should be launching our male engagement strategy, because the biggest problem we have is the masculinity, whereby males will try to control most of the productive assets, and they leave maybe the reproductive assets for the women. So we would like to engage males to ensure that they accept that women also are equally central in contributing towards economy of the country. Also, in terms of registration, we have what we call Marriage, Divorce and Family Relations Act, which gives access to women in terms of inheritance. So this act talks of wills and inheritance. This means that even land ownership, if a husband dies, the woman should be able to own that land. And coupled with that, we have a new Land Act, which gives access. This Land Act is 2022, which gives access, equal access to women and men, so that everyone has got equal access. And as a gender machinery, we ensure that we coordinate to ensure that women take part, the central part in participation. So we have what we call the technical working group, and we bring in all stakeholders, private and public sector, to ensure that we move together. So these technical meetings, we discuss pertinent issues on how women can be put in the forefront. And we have ensured that each and every MDA, ministry, department, and agency has got a focal point for gender. And the greatest part of it is that since the backbone of our economy is agriculture, in the Ministry of Agriculture, we have a department which talks to straight on issues of agricultural gender roles, extension roles, so that gender is mainstreamed in agriculture, because this is our backbone of our economy. So in terms of also ensuring that as a government, we ensure that our budget is aligned to gender. We have reviewed the national gender budget guidelines to ensure that guidelines which formulated the budget are gender sensitive, and we talk to issues of gender, and a certain percentage is allocated to gender issues. And very, very shortly, I think this month, because we realized that gender statistics is very important because it keeps us informed on where we are lagging behind. And we have requested COMESA to conduct a gender in the statistics training, which will be taking place from 19th to 23rd of June. So I know that time is not on our side. That's why I'm trying to rush through just to mention some highlights about this. And also, maybe you might be interested to know that we know that women are lagging behind, and we have taken also the feminist approach. And in Malawi, Netherlands, and Canada, we are co-leaders in what we call the Generation Equality Forum. And we are the co-leaders in the feminist movements and leadership priority area. So looking at it, I think from the feminist movement, we have to try to prioritize that males also take the central part through the male engagement strategy, which is going to be launched on also, I think, 20th of June.
Fantastic, fantastic progress in Malawi. Of particular note is the feminist policy, and really that forthrightness to call it a feminist policy. I heard a lot about the male engagement strategies in the Land Act, and that seems to be a theme that's running through a lot of these presentations, is really the role of legislation in driving equality. At this point, let us hop on a plane and get ourselves to Morocco, where we have Professor Mohammed Ait Kadi, resident member, Hassan II Academy of Science and Technology, and chair of the Scientific Committee, an initiative of the AAA Foundation. Professor Kadi, the floor is yours to share perspectives from Morocco. It's a delight to get to be in community with you again. I dare say a fellow member of the panel as well. Sir, you are on mute, Prof. If our colleagues on the technology side can help our professor. There we go. We have you now, sir.
Okay, you hear me now?
Yes.
Thanks, Vanjero. Very nice to see you in this context. Honorable Ministers, Excellencies, dear friends and colleagues. I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak in this event. And I thank the organizers for their kind invitation. First, I would like to congratulate the MAMO panel for this unique, engaging, and highly authoritative report, as nicely represented by Professor Shirley Hendricks. What I will say should be considered in the general context of Morocco, that Her Excellency Ambassador Asia comprehensively presented. For nearly 2 decades, Morocco has embarked in the transformation of its food system through structural and sector reforms, addressing the issue of social vulnerability in relation to women and youth inclusion, poverty, and the precariousness of small family farms. As part of the Moroccan government's choice of gender policies, I have selected by way of illustration 2 key factors that facilitated, in my view, women's gains in social status and economic development in the rural areas. The first one is access to land. This has been mentioned. As an example, the government took a revolutionary measure to end the marginal status of women with regard to land tenure in what we call the communal land. This is the communal land is a dominant mode of land tenure in which members of an ethnic collectivity hold communal rights on the land they inhabit and or exploit. Traditionally, women cannot inherit land. They can only benefit through male relatives. So this measure is, in my view, revolutionary. Is a revolutionary one as the community's inherent attributes, social norms, and cultural context have been changed for the benefit of women. The second factor relates to the development of cooperatives in Morocco. Women's cooperatives are pivotal, being one of the best tools of inclusion. By creating jobs and promoting local products and know-how, cooperatives are the beating heart of local economies, particularly in the country's rural and remote areas. Across the country, about half of the operational 2,300 women-only cooperatives work in agriculture, argan oil, which is a very specific Moroccan product, and aromatic and medicinal plants. For example, socioeconomic development is strongly anchored around restructuration and inclusiveness all along the argan oil value chain. 852 women cooperatives were created with a total of 12,000 women members. As a result of this participatory and inclusive governance model, targeting women empowerment, the exports of argan oil have more than tripled during the last decade, lifting women out of poverty. Women farmers are benefiting also from an expanded and targeted set of incentives to improve income. We have facilitated access to credit and agricultural insurance. And last but not least, the women workers and farmers benefit from social protection coverage. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that presentation. As I have to say, as an avid and happy customer of cooperatives of produce in Morocco, it's been a joy to look at how that system really works and the ways that the government has supported offering markets for female producers right in Casablanca. And once again, issues of land tenure and again, cooperatives rising to the surface. At this point, I would like to shift us to travel to the Republic of Niger. And I wonder if we do have the Honorable Alaroy Aminata Zokaleni, Minister for Promotion of Women and Protection of Children from Niger with us. Is the Honorable Minister with us? If we do not have the minister, I would love to invite Mr. Garba Yahaya, Secretary General in the Ministry of Agriculture, to join us and share with us experiences from Niger. And I believe his intervention will be in French, and I believe that there is translation services available. Honorable Mr. Yahaya,
oui.
The floor is yours.
Oui, bonjour à tout le monde. Je remercie vraiment les organisateurs de ce panel. Et pour moi, c'est fondamental pour l'ensemble du monde entier parce que la femme se trouve à tous les maillons, surtout les maillons des systèmes agroalimentaires. elle est dans la production, elle est dans la transformation, elle est dans la commercialisation. Mais nous ne sommes pas quand même sans savoir que la femme aussi, elle est un peu lésée par rapport à ce système-là. Et c'est pour cela que le Niger a très tôt saisi ce qu'il faut faire pour vraiment rendre plus autonome la femme. Parce qu'il faut quand même que la femme puisse accéder aux facteurs de production. Donc, dans le cadre de la politique foncière, l'axe 3 de notre stratégie favorise l'accès à la terre et à la sécurité foncière des femmes, des jeunes et des personnes même en situation de handicap. Nous avons également, dans le cadre le quota des femmes dans l'accès aux ressources des projets et programmes. Et dans le cadre de la diffusion, la sensibilisation de l'information auprès des producteurs, nous avons la stratégie e-agriculture, nous avons plusieurs plateformes de vulgarisation des innovations dans le domaine de la transformation agroalimentaire. Il y a également l'organisation et la participation des femmes transformatrices à des foires et des expositions ventes où les femmes expriment tout leur potentiel de transformation. Donc, je crois que certains d'entre vous ont entendu parler du Salon de l'agriculture qu'organise le Niger annuellement. Et pour prendre un peu l'autonomisation de la femme vraiment générale au niveau de nos pays, il faut qu'il y ait une politique, une stratégie commune à nos pays, où pour nous, on pense qu'il faut aller vers une budgétisation sensible au genre, en privilégiant bien sûr la femme. Et au Niger, nous avons pour supporter la femme et ses enfants, d'abord, il y a la gratuité des soins pour les enfants de 0 à 5 ans. Tout ce qui est césarienne aussi, c'est pris, c'est gratuitement. Ce n'est pas payé. Nous avons aussi le leadership, au niveau du leadership, formation, information, création des projets de production végétale, d'embauche bovine, ovine, élevage de reproduction et de transformation agroalimentaire qui sont dédiés aux femmes. Nous avons aussi l'accompagnement des femmes transformatrices pour la promotion de la qualité en les accompagnant pour labelliser les produits qu'elles transforment. Donc, la volonté politique du Niger, dans le cadre de l'autonomisation de la femme, et dans la prise en compte des préoccupations issues de tous les sommets que nous connaissons. Donc, au Niger, la politique, la question liée à l'égalité et à l'équité du genre s'est affirmée avec l'adoption par l'Assemblée nationale en 2019 de la loi sur le quota qui rehausse le quota des postes électifs qui va de 15 à 25% et de 25 à 30% pour les postes nominatifs. Donc, pour les postes électifs, ça passe à 25% et pour les nominations, ça passe à 30%. Donc, en plus de cela, nous avons également le Niger qui applique la politique de genre, pas l'approche féministe, c'est une politique du genre. Et cette politique, elle est consacrée à la Constitution du 25 novembre 2010, qui dispose à son article 10 que tous les Nigériens naissent et demeurent libres et égaux en droit et en devoir. Et en son article 22, l'État veille à l'élimination de toute forme de discrimination à l'égard de la femme, de la jeune fille et des personnes handicapées. Donc, pour rendre l'agriculture attrayante pour les femmes, je crois qu'il faut sensibiliser, former, créer des réalisations réussies, multiplier les centres d'incubation des femmes qui existent déjà au Niger pour permettre à ce que les femmes vraiment apprennent des métiers liés à la transformation agroalimentaire. Ça, l'accompagnement, le partenariat à travers des écoles qui sont déjà là et à travers aussi la sensibilisation des hommes, parce que parfois le problème c'est l'homme. Hein. Donc nous avons des écoles dédiées à la formation des hommes sur le genre, sur l'équité et sur l'égalité entre les sexes. Que quand l'homme voit sa femme en train d'aller faire certaines activités, vraiment qu'elle comprenne que c'est nécessaire. Et vous avez un autre avantage au Niger, c'est qu'il n'y a pas d'écart de rémunération entre les femmes et les hommes. À grade égal, diplôme égal, compétence égale, vous avez le même salaire. Et donc, vraiment, ce problème-là ne se pose pas au Niger. Donc, je crois que tout le monde est au courant de ce qu'on appelle l'initiative 3N, les Nigériens, nous sommes les Nigériens. Depuis 2011, donc vraiment, elle est consacrée à la transformation des systèmes agroalimentaires avec vraiment un accent qui privilégie les femmes. Donc, voilà en substance ce que je vous dis en résumé par rapport à ce que nous entreprenons au Niger. Et je pense que vraiment les femmes ont besoin, doivent être accompagnées pour assurer pleinement leur autonomie. Merci beaucoup. Parce que quand une femme en a, c'est tout le monde qui en a. Parce qu'elle va s'occuper des enfants, elle va même s'occuper des maris. Merci.
Thank you so much, Mr. Yahaya, sharing the perspectives from Niger and the ways that the government of Niger has been working. We heard the role of processing, agro-processing. We had the role of gender policy, the 2010 constitution coming through again. So those legal frameworks, again, being highlighted and spotlighted. I believe that at this point, we have heard from representatives of both countries and governments that have been spotlighted in this particular report, as well as representatives from other governments across the continent here represented. And at this point, I want to hand over to our Master of Ceremonies, my fellow panel member, Dr. Araba.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Kamal Rutenberg. Ladies and gentlemen, as we progress, I would like to confirm if we have Dr. Beth Dunford, Vice President, Agriculture, Human and Social Development at the African Development Bank
Yes,
online.
I'm here.
All right.
Can you see
Wonderful.
me? Great.
Yes, I do. I do now. Okay, Dr. Dunford, the African Development Bank earlier this year convened a follow-up meeting of heads of state and stakeholders in the city of Dakar for the Dakar 2 Summit, where national governments shared their priorities in agriculture, and the bank, of course, provided the support on how it would provide backing to increase agriculture transformation or deepen agriculture transformation in their respective economies. The bank also gets headlines for its promotion of agriculture technologies to help grow the continent, to grow more food. Now that we've heard the details of the report and you've heard the discussions from all the national partners about the report, what can you tell us about your efforts from the bank? What efforts are you making to make agri-food systems work for women in Africa? Over to you.
Great. Well, thank you so much for that question. And I first want to thank the co-chairs of the Malabo Montpellier panel for inviting the African Development Bank to be part of this important conversation. And as the Malabo Montpellier Forum and the African Development Bank research informs us, the majority of women in sub-Saharan Africa work across the agri-food system value chain. So they're farmers, they're agro-dealers, food processors, distributors, traders. And this Bridging the Gap report and today's discussion has really offered some important insight and really, I think, forward-looking solutions to not just increase women's empowerment in food systems, but also to really put them at the center of Africa's food systems transformation. And at the African Development Bank, we are really focused on contributing to that effort. So we believe that investing in agriculture is investing in women. Women farmers, a crucial pillar and resource in African agriculture and rural economies, they face multiple constraints arising from a complex set of rights and obligations that have been highlighted here today that reflect rural community, social, and religious norms, and these constraints reduce their productivity. Since 2016, the bank has invested $7 billion into transforming the continent's agriculture sector into a competitive and inclusive agribusiness through its Feed Africa strategy. So this financing is helping to deliver high-impact agricultural technologies to farmers, build rural road and irrigation infrastructure, establish special and agro-industrial processing zones, increase local fertilizer production with capacity, and create innovative financing for agribusiness with a focus on women and youth. So our Feed Africa strategy is guided in part by an inclusivity and sustainability principle. And this principle ensures that gender equality and sustainable outcomes underpin all agricultural investments and sector dialogue actions in our regional member countries. The strategy seeks to increase representation of women in agricultural research and enhance gender responsive research, monitoring, and evaluation. So the forum's Bridging the Gap report looks at case studies in 4 countries considered among the most successful and active in terms of improving the outcomes for women in agri-food systems. So 2 of those in Ethiopia and Ghana, where the bank has also experienced incredible outcomes through our Technologies for African Agricultural Transformation Program. So to give one example, in Ghana, in the northern region, this TAT program, as we like to call it, is transforming parts of the savanna into commercially viable, no-till agricultural land. And this is under a Ghanaian-managed TAT finance program. Just to give an example, a woman soybean farmer named Tahira Jamila is part of an agricultural collective that has increased plantable land by more than 9,000% in the program's first 3 years. So Tahira says that TAT support enabled her to switch out of manual labor for machinery and also achieve larger scale production. On a smaller scale, our agri-pitch competition supports African youth entrepreneurs by improving their business bankability and potential for investors. And it carves out a women-owned or women-led startup category to really put women at the center of food systems transformation. The bank granted the last agri-pitch competition category winner, Aja Sembene Fall of Senegal, gave her business training and $25,000 to grow her fair trade tea company. So Fall says she'll use part of the money to upgrade a digital payment system and also for computers and digital skills training for her agribusiness employees, all of whom are women. So on a larger scale, the bank is responding to the war in Ukraine's disruption of staple crop, oil, grains, and fertilizer supply chains to Africa, but with a gender lens. We're rolling out a $1.5 billion African emergency food production facility to help our regional member countries through the crisis. So this facility is providing 20 million Africa smallholder farmers with climate smart certified seeds and fertilizer to enable them to grow and replace the shortfall of at least 30 million metric tons of food that's normally imported right now from the Black Sea region to Africa. So this facility supports a farmer e-registration platform that identifies women farmers to receive subsidized inputs in 24 regional member countries. And through the facility, the bank is also supporting regional member countries to review and develop policies, regulations, and guidelines to support women in agriculture, including assessing gender-related constraints to seed access in 15 regional member countries. So lastly, importantly, the FEED assists our member countries update national gender-sensitive and climate-resilient agricultural investment plans. So in closing, I'd like to mention our Affirmative Finance Action for Women in Africa initiative, which is also known as AFAWA. And AFAWA aims to bridge the estimated $42 billion financing gap, which is faced by Africans' women-led small and medium enterprises that really include the agriculture sector. And at the end of last year, our AFAWA initiative reached a landmark of $1 billion in approved lending designated for African women entrepreneurs. And of that, $135 million targets women in agriculture. AFAWA is also bridging the gap with support, for example, to UN Women's Buy from Women project in Cote d'Ivoire. Buy from Women's mobile phone and e-platform connects women smallholder farmers and producers to buyers of agricultural products, wholesalers, retailers, consumers. And the program is an opportunity for women farmers to sell their products to a large market of buyers. So I'd like to conclude today by saying that we welcome the Malabo Montpellier's forum's Bridging the Gap report. Its data, its analysis contributes to our collective goal of recognizing women as pivotal to the transformation of Africa's agri-food systems. And when we invest to grow Africa's food systems, we must also invest in Africa's women. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dumford, for sharing with us the really ambitious and encouraging investments that the African Development Bank is making towards improving financial access for women, not just in agriculture, but in the wider economy. It's good to know that at least about 14% of the 1 billion already released through AFAWA is going to women in agriculture, and we hope to see a greater percentage in the coming months and years. Thank you very much. At this point, I would like to invite the co-chair of the Malabo Montpellier panel, Professor Joachim von Braun, a distinguished professor at ZEF, University of Bonn, to provide the concluding remarks. Professor von Braun.
Thank you very much, DBC. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I think we all have felt in the last couple of hours that there is an urgent need for this report and for this forum. Let me look beyond Africa and into the future. The whole world has a problem with gender equity or inequity, not just Africa. Africa's gender parity is at 67%, South Asia about 60%, Europe's at 70%. So we all have to improve, and we need to learn from each other. I think all hemispheres can learn from each other on gender equity improvement. The opportunities to enhance women's equity in food systems were highlighted strongly with research and science, women scientists, gender-sensitive innovations, technology, time use. We had an emphasis on education and extension services. We focused on enhancing women's production and income, and several of our speakers focused on affirmative actions. But what affirmative actions do work worldwide? Education quota, yes, some extent. Job quota, not really a strong record. Access to capital and land, yes. Yes and yes. That makes a big difference. Wherever you look, access to land, and land is also capital, and financial literacy make a big difference. We focused on post-harvest handling and processing, distribution and trade. Women in trade requires digital access. The nutrition and consumption aspects were nicely highlighted. I personally was pleased to see at the last African Union Summit in Addis Ababa in February a significant, strong, and critical focus on nutrition. That is new. And lastly, leadership and policy. The impressive performance of Rwanda, Togo, Ethiopia, Ghana, and others demonstrates that leadership and policy make a difference. They also demonstrated that there are various pathways towards strengthening women's position in food systems and in society. For instance, a diverse focus on land rights, finance, markets, education, nutrition, and so on. These diverse success stories can inform the national pathways for transforming food systems under the ongoing agenda of the United Nations Food Systems Summit follow-up. Let's look not only for best practices, but let's look for best fit with country contexts. There is a basis. 32 of 42 African countries with national pathway documents do have some attention to women and girls. That should be on the agenda for the upcoming stock-taking event of the UN Food Systems Summit at FAO in July later in July. In closing, I want to thank the team and the panel members that prepared the report, that did the hard work. I thank especially also our co-chairs of the forum, Ambassador Alaoui and former Prime Minister Haile Mariam Desalegn Bosche. I thank all speakers and the session chairs. Our thanks are to African women leaders and men who engaged in changing their own situation and that of their fellow women and shared their stories. As we close this session, do stay connected to this theme and do create opportunities for policy innovations to put women at the center of food systems transformation in Africa and globally. Men on the call, let me address myself to you as quite inappropriately a man makes the closing remarks here. We are all sons and daughters of mothers. We respect our mothers, of course, but we must also respect and work for respect of all women and girls as equals. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor von Braun. At this point, I'll hand over to my colleague, Dr. Lai Butake, for the closing comments or for the wrap up. Dr. Butake.
So there you have it. Thank you, Dr. Araba, for the excellent moderation of this session. And we've come to the end of the 12th Malabo Montpellier Forum. A special thank you to our moderator, of course, to all our speakers who showed up present, to the forum co-chairs, His Excellency Desalegn and Her Excellency Alaoui, to the panel co-chairs, Professor von Braun and Dr. Badian, to all the esteemed Malabo Montpellier panel members here present, and of course to all the senior government representatives who showed up to talk about the findings of this report. Please head to the chat and click on the link that will take you to the resources page of the Malabo Montpellier panel's website. Visit mamopanel.org to download the full report and all the case studies, as well as the executive summary. We also have translated versions for the Togo case study and the executive summary. Thank you so much, and follow the conversation online at mamopanel.com.